Let me ask you something honest. Have you ever walked away from a conversation with a woman completely convinced that you understood exactly what just happened, only to find out later that you missed the entire point? Yeah, me too. And here's what I've come to realize. The problem was never that women are complicated. The problem was that I was listening at the wrong depth. Because here's the truth nobody tells you. Women don't communicate in one layer. They communicate in several, all at once. There's what she says out loud, there's what she means beneath that, there's the feeling she's carrying, and there's what she's hoping, sometimes silently, sometimes desperately, that you'll understand without her having to spell it out. Women have been socially conditioned since childhood to soften their needs, to not appear demanding, to communicate indirectly. So when she says, "I'm fine," maybe she is. Or maybe she's quietly watching to see if you care enough to look closer. Context is everything, and the men who truly understand women aren't mind readers. They're just paying attention on multiple levels: tone, body language, timing, and crucially, what wasn't said. That shift in attention, it changes everything. Now let's talk about something that breaks more relationships than almost anything else. And that's the moment a man tries to solve a feeling instead of simply acknowledging it. When a woman shares something emotional and the response is immediately, "Here's what you should do," she doesn't feel helped. She feels dismissed because she wasn't asking to be fixed. She was asking to be felt with. Emotional validation is how trust is built. It's how walls come down, and it has nothing to do with agreeing with everything she says. It simply means acknowledging that her feelings make sense given her experience. That one shift, from problem solver to genuine listener, creates a level of connection that logic and strategy alone could never build. Now, and I say this with full respect, she's going to test you. Not because she's trying to make your life difficult, but because her nervous system needs to know, are you stable? Can I actually rely on you? These tests are usually unconscious. She's not sitting there with a checklist. She's scanning for consistency, for emotional groundedness, for signs that you won't collapse the moment things get hard. And if you react with defensiveness or anxiety, you've answered her question, just not in the way she was hoping. But if you stay warm, grounded, and steady, you've passed without even knowing there was an exam. Understanding this transforms confusion into clarity. Here's one that I want you to really sit with, because it gets dismissed far too often. Her intuition is not irrational. It is a highly calibrated instrument. Women are wired biologically and socially to read micro-expressions, behavioral inconsistencies, and shifts in energy. What gets labeled as too emotional is often extraordinarily precise pattern recognition. If she tells you something feels off and you can't identify a logical reason, pay attention. She's picked up on something real. Maybe your story didn't fully line up. Maybe you were physically present but mentally somewhere else. She noticed. The lesson here is simple. Be consistent. Not perfect, just consistent. When your words, your energy, and your actions all point in the same direction, her intuition relaxes. And when a woman's intuition is at rest, she opens up in ways that no amount of charm or strategy could manufacture. Let's go deeper. There's a need that lives in almost every woman, and it runs incredibly deep, the need to feel genuinely chosen. Not convenient, not default, not you happen to be there. A real, deliberate, enthusiastic selection. And when that feeling is missing, no amount of compatibility fills the gap. It shows up in small ways that men constantly overlook, forgetting things that matter to her, being half present during conversations, making plans without intention. All of that quietly communicates, you are not a priority, and she will feel it long before she ever says it. But the reverse is equally powerful. When a man makes a woman feel truly chosen, through specific attention, intentional time, remembering the small things, he creates a bond that is genuinely difficult to break. It requires nothing more than awareness and intention. But the return on that investment is profound. Now, I need to bring up something that creates enormous confusion between men and women, and that's emotional memory. She remembers a conversation from 3 years ago with the same emotional intensity as the day it happened. For most men who tend to process and move past emotions more linearly, this feels irrational. It isn't. Women's brains show significantly higher activity in regions linked to emotional memory. When something carries weight, it gets stored with the full feeling attached. So when she brings something up from the past, she's not being petty. The feeling was never fully resolved. And the smart response, the one that actually closes the wound, isn't debating the facts of what happened. It's addressing the feeling that's still alive. I understand why that hurt you lands in a completely different place than that was so long ago. One heals, the other reopens. Let's talk about attraction for a moment, because this one is widely misunderstood. Women are drawn to certainty, not arrogance. Certainty. Knowing who you are, what you want, and where you're headed. Being emotionally self-sufficient. Having a life so full and purposeful that her presence adds to it rather than completes it. That energy is magnetic. On the other hand, neediness, seeking constant reassurance, making your emotional state dependent on her responses, creates anxiety rather than attraction. Her instincts are essentially asking, if he needs this much from me, how stable can he really be? Certainty signals strength. Neediness signals unpredictability. The difference between them is one of the most important things a man can understand. And while we're here, let me be very direct about this. She is watching what you do, not what you say. Women are students of behavior. Your promises carry far less weight than your patterns, and they are watching those patterns constantly, not maliciously but naturally, because behavior is the only reliable data. A man can say, "I care about you" every day and still communicate emotional absence through his actions. But small, consistent behaviors build enormous trust over time. Showing up when you said you would. Following through on the little commitments. Remembering something she mentioned in passing 3 weeks ago. These things compound. Women don't need perfection. They need reliability. And those two things are not the same. Here's something the modern world has gotten badly wrong about what women actually want. They don't primarily want performance. They want depth. Status and capability might earn initial attention. But what creates genuine, lasting connection is realness. A man who can drop the mask and simply be present. Vulnerability, handled well, not collapsed into, is one of the most powerful things a man can offer. Being honest about your inner world, without needing her to rescue you from it, creates something she can actually connect with, because she has nothing real to hold on to when she's only seeing a performance. Depth and authenticity are what make her stay. And finally, this one matters more than perhaps all the others. When a woman has high standards, when she knows her worth, won't accept disrespect, and walks away from what doesn't serve her, that is not her being difficult. That is a woman who has a healthy relationship with herself. Her standards are a direct reflection of her self-worth, and she is watching to see if you recognize that value or if you're intimidated by it. The goal was never to get a woman to lower her standards. The goal is to grow into someone whose own values and self-respect naturally rise to meet hers. That's not a game, that's not a trick. That's a person choosing, deliberately and consistently, to become better. So let me bring this home. Women are not complicated. They are layered. They communicate in depth, they connect through feeling, they trust through consistency, and they stay for authenticity. Every single thing I've shared with you today comes down to one fundamental shift. Stop trying to decode women and start genuinely trying to understand them. Not to gain an advantage, not to win something, but because understanding another person deeply, truly deeply, is one of the most meaningful things a human being can do. She's not a puzzle to be solved. She's a person to be known. Start there.